Welcome everybody to a special roundtable discussion as we talk about Black History Month. And we have some influential people in the Kansas City community joining us today. I'm Ryan Lefevre, and it's my honor to be invited to this. From my perspective, I hope I learned something today, and I hope I asked the right questions so that everyone watching will also learn something today. And let me introduce to you our panel. And as I'm looking at the screen, I feel like I'm in the opening scene of the Brady Bunch. So I'll go around and Nick, you can go Google Brady Bunch and see what I'm talking about. But let's begin over here. One of my favorite people in the world, and I mean that sincerely, Bob Kendrick, who is the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And we're so grateful and honored that that museum is in Kansas City and that Bob's the president. And he's a wonderful human being. He is the best dressed man in Kansas City. He is an educator. And as you can see, he has $1 million smile. And I've learned so much from him. So I'm glad that Bob's here. Over here is Royals outfielder Nick Heath, one of the fastest players in Nick, I can say Major League Baseball now because you're a major leaguer, no longer one of the fastest guys in the minor leagues. And we got to see his major league debut last year. I got to see his first big league hit, an RBI double against the Cubs. And he graduated from Junction City High School. His mother was a track star at Kansas State. And so I'm glad that Nick's here because Nick was an educator for his teammates after we had the civil unrest last summer, that he was someone who really helped a lot of people who didn't understand try to understand. So I'm glad that Nick is with us. Down here is Reggie Sanders, one of my favorite Royals of all time, and he was only here for a couple of years, but he had a tremendous major league career, 17 years. He was an all-star. He was a world champion with the Diamondbacks in 2001. And when he was with the Royals, he hit his 300th career home run, which at the time, he was one of 5 players in history to have at least 300 home runs and 300 stolen bases in a career. And he's still a member of the Royals organization as a special advisor to General Manager Dayton Moore. So thank you for being here, Reggie. Just below me is Darwin Penny, who very well could have accomplished what Reggie did as a major leaguer, but as a minor leaguer, some guy named Barry Bonds got in his way, and it just didn't quite work out the way Darwin had planned. But Darwin's had a heck of a career. He is from Temple, Texas, and currently serves as the executive director of the Kansas City MLB Urban Youth Academy, which serves and empowers underserved youth in the Kansas City area using baseball and softball as a platform. So Darwin is actively working hard in our community. And then down here would be Karen Daniel, who recently joined the Royals ownership group. So here's one of the official welcomes, Karen, to the ownership group. And I'm going to put my glasses on here, Karen, because I want to make sure I get your title with Black and Veatch correct to the letter, because it is impressive. Karen is a retired Black and Veatch executive director, chief financial officer, and president of the Global Finance and Technology Solutions Division. So try and digest that one, guys. That's and in addition to what she's accomplished as a professional, she's also been a great civic leader in Kansas City. So this is a great panel, and I'm just really honored to be a part of it. As a white American who grew up in Los Angeles and had a lot of Black friends, and I probably saw a lot more racial equality in that environment compared to other parts of the United States. And so I think viewing what happened this past summer, from my point of view, was a bit confusing because I just haven't experienced the level of racism that all of you have experienced and most of the country has experienced. But so as I've tried to just learn, I've allowed some Black voices to just, tell me what's going on. What do I need to know? And for some reason, I was really hit by something that Morgan Freeman said years ago, and he's reiterated since, that he was not a big fan of Black History Month because he felt like, as a Black American, there was too much focus on Black and not American, and that his history is American history, and he deserves more than 1 month. So I just want to go around the horn. Let's go clockwise here, and begin with Bob Kendrick. And Bob, in your opinion, what exactly is Black History Month? What should come from Black History Month? And I guess by extension, what is Black History Month not about?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, Ryan, I understand where Mr. Freeman was coming from contextually, but because there have been gaps in the pages of American history books, there are so many who have contributed to the greatness of this country and their stories have never been told. And the Black experience is a prime example of that. So yeah, the designation of 1 month probably doesn't make sense, but until you're able to completely integrate the Black experience into the American experience, you have to kind of have a way to at least tout this. It's not in the pages of American history books. And so our children are not getting educated on the contribution of Black folks. They're not getting educated on the contribution of brown folks. And so as a cultural institution, as we are, we celebrate Black history, but as part of the American experience, 365 days a year. So Black History Month doesn't mean as much to us. I think a lot of people think it does, but it really doesn't. But for those who it becomes their trigger to say, I need to focus on this, so let me come to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum and introduce my classroom or my children or my family to that story. It's just a precursor for the fact that we start somewhere with it. But I agree. I think at some point in time, once we have a very inclusive look at American history, then you can get rid of these other segmented aspects. You won't necessarily need them anymore. But it is just like these cultural institutions. These cultural institutions fill in the gap, and it is needed. But again, we look at it through an entirely different lens, perhaps, than others do.
Nick, how about you from a perspective of someone in his 20s?
Well, when Mr. Kendrick touched on there being a gap in history books, I'm a wholeheartedly agree with that because I guess the knowledge that I get from Black History Month or the things that have happened to people that are African-American are things that I get from my parents, things that I get from my grandparents. So you may look on TV recently and see something happen to somebody that's African-American, and the first thing they bring up is like the LA riots and Rodney King and all that stuff going down. And you would hear, about how things are kind of coming full circle. And from my perspective, I guess it's a little different. Growing up, I had some of those situations. I was in some of those situations, I would say, where being Black almost felt uncomfortable being in certain places. But at the same time, I think a lot of the people that I'm around now, a lot of people that I've been around in recent years, I wouldn't say that, I've come across it too much. I can definitely tell, when I leave the house every now and again, I might, see somebody glance at me funny. I might see somebody, take a different way around something when I'm coming through. So I think I kind of understand it, but with him saying that, there's a gap in what Black History Month means, I think Black History Month is big for people that are my age, people that are closer to me, because it's the opportunity for us to learn something. Now, granted, we should be learning things year round, and the Black experience doesn't change. Like he said, it's 365 days a year. But I think it's the opportunity for people who aren't as informed as they could be. I think it's it's kind of put it in your face. You know what I mean? Like this is huge for us. And I think as that continues to grow, like he said, as it continues to grow and people start to get a better grasp of it, it doesn't become a month. I think it becomes something that people are more mindful of every day. And that's kind of the end goal. I understand him saying that, we don't need 30 days. We don't need however many days for this to be, just for us. I also, in my opinion, at times thought it was for show. You know what I mean? When you look back at it and you say, this can't happen to them anymore. This can't happen to African American people anymore. And then you skip ahead a few months and the same thing happens again. Well, it's kind of a excuse me, it's kind of a moment where you're going, at what point do we stop paying attention to it and say, this is here for us to learn about and start doing something about it? When I went to school, you could learn about Black history, but you had to sign up for a course for that instead of them just putting it in your curriculum. You know what I mean? When I was in high school, I wasn't learning about all the different things that are going on, like Black Wall Street. I had to go off on my own and research stuff like that. I had to ask my grandparents. I had to ask my parents. I had to sit down with other African American kids who were just as clueless as I was on a lot of different matters that involve African Americans. And I think the biggest thing that we can do, and you said it earlier, is not being as educated and wanting to be more educated on different matters. I think the biggest thing that we can do is just continue to push the agenda on trying to get people to understand, what happened in the past, what's happening today, and what we can do to stop it moving forward.
Karen?
Well, I would say that Black History Month is significant, and I agree with the previous comments that it's important year round. And one of the things that we're trying to do in our family is do more storytelling. There is no better storyteller than Bob Kendrick. We all know that. However, I think the art of storytelling has kind of lost its glamour, and because there's online this or that, but Black History Month highlights our heroes and heroines. I mean, the things that kids may not otherwise understand or know about. And even if you know about Dr. Martin Luther King, it's always a good time to say, well, what was he about? He gave his very life for us. And it creates a recommitment in my mind, daily, weekly, around the idea that we have to tell our history. Because the first African American history class I took in college, I was astonished to learn the narrative. It wasn't very pretty in terms of, it was all about things that either were portrayed negatively or this great suffering that we went through. And while we did, the celebration of coming through that really wasn't told that well. And it was told from a perspective of televisions as opposed to families, Black families who actually lived it. So I think it's important year round. And I think in light of what happened this summer, it was an opportunity to double down, recommit to this idea that we can forge our way forward and overcome the barriers. You mentioned equality, but I'm thinking more about equity these days, which is the next level, which says, let's remove the barriers that keep Black people, other underrepresented and underserved communities from moving forward. So for me, it's a year-round activity, though I do take great pleasure in the February timeframe to hear those stories be told on a national level.
Thank you, Karen. Darwin?
Yeah, when I look at Black History Month, the word that immediately comes to mind for me is celebration. It is a celebration of the African American experience. I do understand what Mr. Freeman was saying, and I too ascribe to that. It is not just 1 month, and certainly you could take it in a manner such that not only is it just 1 month, but it's the shortest month of the year that we get an opportunity to celebrate. But I also look at when we celebrate things, when we celebrate Christmas, if you are a Christian, it's all year round. It's not just December the 25th. And so Black history for me continues to evolve. I was fortunate enough to be a part of a first Black history class that was taught in my high school back in Temple, Texas. And it was so that we could get some of the basic information. It does not go in depth into what the whole experience was like, but here are some basic information, some dates. And that's when I look at this month, it's giving you some basic information if you had not heard of or took time. Celebrations are always, for me, a time of reflection and to look back and to see how did we get to this point. And if you don't look at Black History Month, you will start to lose how far we've come. We certainly still have a long way to go. And it's like, how do we continue to progress? If we don't know from whence we've came, how do we know how we're going to move forward? And then the last thing that I'll say about it as a month, you're trying to complete a story without significant chapters being told. And how can you tell a complete American history story if you're going to leave out a whole segment of struggle, of entanglement, of fighting for justice, of trying to gain respect? Because at the end of it, for me, that's a huge word, is respect. And so when you were at least able to get it on the calendar, you were at least acknowledging my experience and respecting what I've had to go through as a people to say, guess what? We're going to celebrate it. We're going to acknowledge it. We're going to, be able to reflect back at how do we get to this point and how do we move forward. And so for me, it is a celebration of culture, but it does not tell the whole story. And unless you live it out on a daily basis, then the month to me is then rendered in vain.
Interesting. How about you, Reggie?
Yeah. As we commemorate the Black History Month, I would not be here today if it had not been for the battles fought and won by the men and women years ago. I'm so proud to be here just to honor this, rich history and heritage. It's about the lived, shared experience of all African Americans, high and low, famous, obscured, and how those experiences have shaped and challenged and ultimately strengthened America. It's about taking an unvarnished look at the past so we can create a better future. It's a reminder of where we as a country have been so that we know where we need to go. But Black History Month shouldn't be treated as though it is somehow separate from our collective American history, or somehow just boiled down, to a compilation of the greatest hits from like Satchel Paige or Hank Aaron or Bob Gibson, or, even from the March, to Washington. But this is my prayer. My prayer is that one day this should be more than just a commemoration of particular events. That's my prayer.
And Ryan,
Yeah.
and I think Karen raised a great point, because what Black History Month should not be is an opportunity to focus on the struggles of Black folks and the things that we've had to overcome. Because you talked about something before we actually started the program, and you talked about commonality. And I can tell you this, very few folks can relate to my struggles in this America, from being enslaved people to having police dogs released on us as we were ascending through the civil rights movement, being sprayed by water hoses, the police brutality that still manifests itself today. There's very little folk, I don't know anybody else that can even remotely relate to that. You may empathize with that, but you can't relate to that. But my success stories, you absolutely can relate to. And our success stories have never been fully documented and presented. So even within these, as you say, Darwin, 28, 29 days, we get to highlight those success stories. And the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum highlights an American success story, however, 365 days a year. And to me, that is where you create commonality, because I want you to understand my struggles. but I also want you to embrace my successes. And when we're able to do that, I think we're able to more effectively bridge the racial divide. I just subscribe to the belief that the more you know about me and the more I know about you, is that number one, you find out that we have far more in common than we do differences. But again, our differences are not things that we should be running from. We have a tendency in this country to run from those who don't look like me, who don't act like me, who don't talk like me, who doesn't worship like me. And we have to stop doing that, and it all boils down to what Darwin talked about, respect and tolerance. And so if we can do that, and it starts with perhaps this 1 month, and it starts with cultural institutions like the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, they are so vital. They really are. And for young people like Nick, it's important that they get to see themselves in their glory. That those are not the only images that they see of themselves, so that they do take pride in who they are. And so that is why I think a story like ours is so vitally important.
Buck O'Neill's name always seems to come up when we're talking about the museum, or we're talking about someone who has come along and helped us heal some wounds. And as you're talking, I didn't even think about this before we got together today, but forgive me if I'm misquoting Buck, but I remember him saying on more than one occasion, Bob, you can verify this or not, but that the lack of civil rights in our country was not just a loss to Black America, it was a loss to America. Because how can we sit here right now and say confidently that there wasn't a Black mind before civil rights that could have cured cancer? There were so many thoughts and ideas and creativity that just never had a chance to make any kind of an impact to the United States. That's not just the suffering of Black America. It's America's suffering. We took a huge part of our population and just completely muted their voices. And I know for the Negro League players, the motto was kind of like, we'll let our playing do the talking, right? But Nick, you being a contemporary player today, you can let your talking do the talking now. It's not just your playing. I mean, you have a platform now where you can speak, and it's more accepted now. And I'm just wondering, with things like the Players Alliance that you've been a part of, how have you taken that responsibility of having a platform now that you will speak, and people who weren't listening 50 years ago are now listening?
I think that's a really good, man, I don't know how to answer that one. That kind of leads into a question I had for Reggie and Mr. Kendrick, Ms. Daniel.
Take over, Nick.
No, I don't want to take over, but this is also new for me. You know what I mean? This is also the first time, I guess, in my life I've been in a position where I could say something and somebody might listen to what I have to say, or in a position where I'm actually able to go be a part of things that can create change, or if change is already being made, I can get behind something and push it even further. So I don't want to avoid the question. I want to come back to it, but I want to give them the opportunity to think about what I have to ask. And I just want to say, if you guys had the exact same resources that I had now, whether it be followers, whether it be a march, whether it be an organization to be a part of, is there any advice you guys can give me? Or is there anything you wish you would have been able to do at my age that maybe you can't do now, or maybe wouldn't be as big of an impact now that I could step up and do, or that I could, speak to my counterparts about? You don't have to answer that now, but I do want to come back to that and say that, man, this is my life, you know what I mean? And I have friends that look just like me. I got 5 sisters, I got a family, and I want to also be able to leave the house and not have to worry about them worrying when they leave the house. I want to be able to go out with my family and be able to just enjoy life and not have to be like, okay, well, are people going to look at us funny, or is anybody going to say something to us? Is anybody going to act differently towards us because of the way that we look? So I think the big thing for me right now is just going out and showing people that I do have a lot of the same things in common as a lot of other people. And I do And I do want to push that forward. And I do want people to have the opportunity to be in the same position I'm in. I want people to have the opportunity to be in better positions than I'm in. So whatever I can do to go out there and help, whether it be talking to our roommate, we sit down and talk every now and again. Talking to some of my teammates, they let me stand up and talk in front of the team for a little bit and just, share some of my thought processes and share what I felt at the time that a lot of things were going on last summer. I think this is really big, and this is something bigger than I am. So me sacrificing and giving up whatever I got to give up for the next person that looks like me to have the better opportunity, that's exactly what I want to do.
Who wants to take the first stab at Nick's question to the rest of you? Reggie?
Yeah, so I will. I'll take it back to me as a player. Growing up as a young baseball player, we weren't even given the opportunity to see what the executive table looked like. By that, I mean, we were so game centric. There were no existing programs such as, what we're doing now, Nick, to help foster and cultivate a new generation of player and Black player as well. And so when you think about what we did during the height of all of the unrest inside the Kansas City Royals organization, by bringing the whole organization together, the Black players together specifically, to be able to figure out what the unrest was all about, to put a voice to it. And I think our players have done an amazing job in not only voicing their frustrations, but also doing something about it. And Nick was at the forefront of supporting our organization and our players in the language and just love. And so I just have to say, Nick, you are where you need to be, my friend. You are doing everything that you need to do. There's obviously a lot of work that still needs to be done, but at the forefront of everything that we're all, and what's important, I agree with, is equity. It's about the equity piece now. And so as we're all diving in and trying to make sure that, we continue to voice all the situations and all of our frustrations, but it's important that we make sure that we hold our hierarchies to a higher standard to make sure that we are implementing our Black, our minority people in high-powered positions.
Karen, how about you? What's your message not only to Nick, but just other young men and women in the Black community that have a platform that I assume you didn't have when you were that age?
Right. And because I didn't have that platform, one of the things that I want to say to Nick is, one, thanks for being here today, but given how younger people communicate and therefore the power you have with your words, telling your story is only the beginning, because obviously telling your story will give other people the inspiration to do the hard work that you did to get where you are. The rest of the work that we would want from you and your generation, we collectively want, is how do we then become part of the hierarchy that Reggie just talked about and go at it with a mentality that fights for equity. It's not enough just to say, I made it, here's how I made it. The next step is, how can I help you make it? And as we continue to ascend in our careers, whether they are sports, marketing, whatever they may be, education, actively engaging in removing barriers, I think, is the next step. And you are in a prime spot to do that.
Darwin, I think for people who are aware of the Urban Youth Academy, they think it's a place where kids go to play sports. But there's, which is true, but there's a lot more going on there. What's the overall message in shaping the minds and preparing those young men and women when they are not coming to the Urban Youth Academy anymore?
Well, for us, it is always about preparing them for what life has in store for them. Baseball and softball are just part of the experience. And I believe that baseball and softball, our messaging is always is this is going to identify who you really are supposed to be in life, right? That's my message to Nick is you've been given a platform. The platform elevates you so that you can be heard. So use your voice. Okay. Don't back down from the situation, because all of us have been put in a place for something bigger than us. And that's the way we have to see it. It's bigger than me as one individual. And so that's what we always are voicing to our kids, to make sure that as you utilize baseball for the platform that it's going to give you, for the relationships that it's going to give you, for the education that it's going to give you, and certainly for the social consciousness that it should give you about where you are in life. And then pick your words at how you're going to use them. And to the point that Ms. Daniel made is that now I'm in a position, how can I leverage these relationships that I've had to help somebody else, right? It cannot be about me, right? You guys have all heard our general manager Dayton talk about how our success is all connected. And so somebody's success, Nick, is connected to you, because the words that you say, they won't hear me say. And they need to hear those words come from you. And so use the position so that it can be valued, so it can be heard, and so it can be properly represented. Nobody can tell your story better than you. Okay, I can't tell your story. Okay, and I know we have one of the great storytellers of our generation on here. Bob could tell the story, but the guys who were there could tell the story even better because of what they bring to the table in the experience. And so that's all we ask our kids to do, is find out your piece of the story. It's unique, it's special, but you've got to make sure that you tell your story in such a way that somebody remembers. And then somebody now wants to take that baton and run with it. That's what Dr. King did for us. Okay, he put a baton out there, and the sad part is people been fighting over the baton instead of just running. When you get the baton, just run. Okay, and run your leg, right? It's like you run track before. You got to run your leg. And that's all I'm trying to do here. And that's what we're trying to get each kid. If somebody doesn't do their part, then we wind up lacking.
That's great. I'd like to wrap up here. What I've learned from you today is that what Black History Month is not only about is the struggle that Black America has had here, but the success stories. And we're in an era now where we can Google something, we hear a name or something, we can Google about it, and we can learn more. And so I'd like all of you to share, if you could, a Black success story. And if it's somebody that maybe is not so mainstream that we need to learn more about, or go search their story, or maybe it's someone obvious. I know, Bob, you were saddened by the loss of Hank Aaron, who was your idol. And Karen, if you want to go in a different direction, my feelings won't be hurt. But when we talk about Kansas City, we love to talk about 18th and Vine and all the history at 18th and Vine and the Negro Leagues Museum and the Gem Theater and now the Urban Youth Academy. But would you share your 18th and Vine history and how that inspired you?
Sure. It's first, let me say, and following up on Nick, I think for those of us who are in the positions to change the outcome, it's not only my responsibility, our responsibility, but I think it is an honor to be able to participate in the growth and well-being of our community in general. And the 18th and Vine piece of my story is that when I was 6 years old, our grandfather loved baseball and he loved golf. And we used to get to hang out at our grandparents' house on the weekend and go to church on Sunday and so forth. But basically, the bond between my grandfather and me was twofold. One is that he taught me about baseball. I was 6 years old when the St. Louis Cardinals won the World Series. And I remember much of that conversation like it was yesterday. and Bob Gibson pitched, 3 of those games, lost 1. But anyway, Grandpa thought it was really important to teach life lessons. And he talked to me about the art of baseball and how pitching was so pivotal to who was going to win, and the theory and the strategy, today's language, about pitching. And it eventually turned into something that he and I would do over time. And I therefore developed a deep love and understanding for baseball. So I've watched baseball all my life and enjoyed it. The other piece of my grandpa's story is he had a store on the corner of 18th and Vine, where the Blue Room is today. So I like to think he was the first business person that I knew, but he was also a Capricorn, and Capricorns have that interest in business, they say. But he taught me also about being responsible. And that responsibility turned into the commitment that I made to my career. But ultimately, the coming together of that to honor my grandfather, his love of baseball, and what he meant to me. Because as a little girl, kids are shaped by what you do to them or what you do for them. And what he did for me was give me a sense of knowledge, confidence that I could go and do what I wanted to do. And I had this opportunity to join the Royals ownership group. And I must tell you, I was overjoyed with the opportunity to honor my grandfather by making an investment in the Royals. And also John Sherman, for a little girl, 6 years old, John Sherman and the owners group made the impossible possible for me, because frankly, I wouldn't have dreamt of that when I was 6 years old. But so here I am today telling that story, because I hope it does inspire other young girls, boys, to go and do the things that they really want to do, and the things people thought they couldn't do. And now they do. So that's my connection to baseball and 18th and Vine.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Karen. I was hoping I could lead you down that road and you would jump on. So Reggie, how about you? What's a Black History Month story that people need to be more aware of?
Well, I will have to, in lieu of Hank Aaron, for me, even more so as a Black man, how Mr. Aaron was able to endure, abuse, direct death threats, and how, he did it with unbelievable, dignity and really showed us how to love and have class in the face of adversity, and in the ultimate example of how a champion should be in life. So I'm so thankful for his strength, and he talked about his experiences in a way that you felt so authentically connected to his journey. And I still feel it to this day. I believe that he is up in heaven, looking at us and saying, job well done, continue the fight. But I tell you, what elevates him to an American hero for me is not what he did, but how he did it. He lived a beneficial life for all of us to model, a beneficial life that is one that is lived in such a way that precedes legacy, and it starts as you live and help everyone around you be the best that you can for your family, for your community, and ultimately for the world. So he is definitely my hero.
Thanks, Reggie. Nick.
Ms. Daniel, you paid a little bit of homage to your grandfather. I'm gonna pay a little mine to my grandmother on my dad's side. She lived in East Lake, Georgia, just like we did. I spent a lot of my childhood over at her house, whether it be learning something, whether it be doing something I shouldn't have been doing and getting a whipping from it, just a whole bunch of different things. So she was a little more of a local activist, just in terms of bringing the community together, doing everything she could to, keep guns out of our neighborhood, to keep people out of our neighborhood who shouldn't have been there. She wanted it to be a safe place. She wanted it to be a place that people could come and feel like home. And I think I want to attribute a lot of who I am today into looking back into what she did for her community, and knowing that my grandmother in Junction City is doing the same in the community there. She holds Thanksgiving feasts for people who don't have Thanksgivings at home with their own families. So, they go to the church, they open the doors up for the church, and from like, I don't know, 11 to maybe 5 in the afternoon, they just hand out free Thanksgiving meals. So I'm a attest a lot of things that I do today to them, because I grew up seeing them give everything they had to help out other people. I grew up seeing them worry about themselves last and worry about the people that they cared about first, making sure that the community knew that they always had a place to go, where they knew they could be safe, where they knew they could come be themselves. And ultimately, that's what I want. And that was my question for you all earlier, which was, if there was something I can do now that you wish you would have done that maybe I'm not doing, or that you wish you were able to do, I think that's big for me, because this is my opportunity to show people that I'm invested, not only in the Kansas City community, but in Junction City, in Georgia, and communities across the world where people feel like looking like us might be a problem, or looking like us might be something that's holding you back. And the only thing I want to do is give people the space and give people the opportunity to go out there and be themselves, to go out there and chase whatever they want to chase, no matter what it may be, and to know that they can do it, and do it because it's on their heart, and do it because they love it. So my two heroes are definitely both my grandmothers. One passed away a while back, but I always get phone calls from my dad, and he always talks to me about things that she's done. And it's kind of, and you guys are saying storytelling, and that's kind of what my dad does for me. He gives me stories about my grandmother that I wasn't able to witness for myself. So I'm getting a little teary eyed. I'm sorry.
We all are.
Yeah.
It's just, it's different to me because we didn't have a ton coming up, and now I'm in a position to give back to people who might not have that either. So Mr. Kendrick, I want to say, as often as I can, I want to be at the Negro League Baseball Museum. Mr. Penny, as often as I can, I want to be down at the Urban Youth Academy. And I just want to give back, man. I just want to give back, to give people the opportunity that maybe I didn't have, to give people a chance to go out there and chase what they love, to give people who go out there and chase an education, because nobody can take that from you. And I just want to see, I want to see Black boys and Black girls across America do everything they ever thought they possibly could without somebody telling them, or without them feeling like somebody's going to hold them back from it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I speak for all of us, Nick. You are well on your way. You
Yes,
are well
sir.
on your way. And we're lucky to have you.
I'm lucky to have you guys. I really, really appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Darwin?
I want to think about two people, if I may. One, baseball related. Certainly my life has been centered around baseball, but the first part of my life was centered around the military. Growing up in a military household, my father, a career military man. My military African-American hero is a guy from Waco, Texas, by the name of Dory Miller. A lot of people don't know about Dory Miller, who, as a Navy cook, manned a machine gun at the attack on Pearl Harbor and shot down 7 enemy planes. And I say that in light of what we had gone through in the past couple of years with NFL players taking a knee and people saying how they had disrespected not only the flag, but the military. We've been fighting in the military since in every war that has taken place among United States military, all the way back to Crispus Attucks, and I ain't gonna get on him today. But we've been here. And so Dory Miller seized an opportunity coming up basically from the kitchen and to the front line of fire and did what needed to be done, because as an adaptive person, that's what he did. He saw what needed to be done. And I want to encourage people, when you see what needs to be done, step up and do it. Okay. We've been part of the military. We've served a country when the country didn't serve us. And that's what Dory Miller did. Pearl Harbor. Okay. And then another one is, I think, forgotten in baseball. When you see all of the capitalism and the success and the financial stability that Major League Baseball brings, certainly we know about what Jackie did. Mr. Aaron, I was pleased to get a chance to meet Mr. Aaron, but often overlooked is Mr. Curt Flood and what Curt Flood did to set free agency as we know it today in motion, simply because he loved his family and he wanted to make sure that as a tenured man, he wanted to be respected and have some decision-making power into where a team could send him and trade him to. And he put himself on the line for the Reggie Sanders, the Nick Heaths, and all of the major league players that have come after him that have had some choice about where they go, at least at some point in their career, once you get to that availability. And so for me, I tip my hat off to Curt Flood because he sacrificed the back part of his career for the betterment of others. And for Mr. Dory Miller, Waco, Texas, who sacrificed coming out of that galley to go up and fight a fight, and then ultimately lost his life about a year later, still fighting for the United States Navy.
Wow. Well, Bob, never in a million years did I ever think I would say this to you of all people, but try and follow that one up.
No, and he's absolutely right. That's one of the things that we talk about here, and a future exhibition that is on tap here for the Negro Leagues Museum is Black baseball and the military, for the exact same reasons that Darwin mentioned. We've been able to trace Negro League players going as far back as the Spanish-American War, who served this country, which likely means that there were those who fought in the Civil War, and all the way up through modern day conflict. And so Black folks and patriotism has always been connected. And Curt Flood, of course, who every young athlete, I don't care what sports discipline you play, you should know the story of Curt Flood. And please understand, Curt Flood was a great baseball player who lost everything because he stood steadfast in his conviction. And he helped make life better for future athletes to come along and make a wonderful living playing their respective sport, and to give a voice. And so I absolutely concur. Now, for me, obviously, it's probably no mystery. It's the late, great Buck O'Neil. Buck O'Neil, and sometimes we throw out hero way too often, but Buck O'Neil was truly an American hero. Henry Aaron was an American hero. It's not an overused term when you look at he and Jackie Robinson and others like them. Buck O'Neil was the grandson of enslaved people who lived long enough to help create change, who lived long enough to enjoy the change that he helped create, and then continue to demonstrate to all of us that you could absolutely get further in this life with love than you could with hate. And it cannot be understated how Buck O'Neil, through his generosity, through his kindness, through his ability to forgive, doesn't mean that you forget. And I think that's the case for all the Negro League players. They didn't forget, but they had an innate ability to forgive and to not allow their hearts to be hardened with hate. And Buck had that gentle spirit. And because of that, he endeared so many. And Buck O'Neil, to me, embodied what we should be and that we should continue to strive to be. And so having spent so many years around the man, and I tell people all the time, guys, I was smart enough to keep my mouth closed and listen. And the wisdom that he imparted and the opportunity for me to share that now, as you talked about passing the baton, as it was passed over to me here at the Negro League Baseball Museum. The only time, Darwin, I've ever ran without a ball in my hand. Because that old track thing didn't work for Bob. But, you know, to be able to carry on the legacy and his voice and the voice of all those others who were part of these leagues known as the Negro Leagues is a tremendous honor. It really is. But it starts with me, with everything that Buck O'Neil left us. And so when they decided to name the old Broadway Bridge for Buck, and the thing that I say, we caught a little criticism because everybody was mad, like, why they name that old raggedy bridge after Buck? But we knew when we named the bridge for Buck that it was going to be the best opportunity to get a new bridge. And the folks who worked on this grandfathered Buck's name in. But who better to have a bridge? Because Buck O'Neil was the consummate bridge builder, Ryan. He bridged the gap between black and white, young and old, and men and women, unlike anyone I've ever seen in my life. And he did. He had the same innateness that we look at with the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We look at it with Gandhi, Mother Teresa, those kinds of individuals. And his influence is still being felt today. It will always be a part of me as long as I have an existence here in this earthly world. And so he is the person that naturally comes to mind for me.
At this time, the news about the changing of the name to the Kansas City Monarchs, our minor league team here in town, and several other really amazing things have happened at the Negro League Museum in the last 2 to 3 years. I mean, it's had a great run. I remember, of course, the All-Star game back when I was working with you, Bob. But I just want to say congratulations and thank you for all that is happening around the Negro Leagues, 18th and Vine, baseball, the Urban Youth Academy. You know, I'm going to come and visit on, I think it's on the 22nd, but I just wanted to say that before we get off, because that was a huge announcement last week, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, and if I can add to that, Karen, I think the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, I think, is a good beginning for people like me to appreciate the achievements. Because I talk to Bob about this all the time. You know, I think the hardest part about the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum for a white person is to go in there, and there's just a lot of shame that we carry into those halls of like, why did we even have to have a Negro Leagues in the first place? It's just a reminder of the painful part of our history. But we exit those walls feeling completely different about it. And I think what I've learned from all of you today, that's just a microcosm, if you will, of Black History Month. I've learned a lot about Black History Month today, to celebrate the achievements and not forget about the achievements of Black Americans in our country. I'll add to that too, the Negro League statistics now are going to be part of Major League history now.
Major League Baseball.
They're not their own entity. It's part of the entire baseball history. And so I just want to thank all of you for sharing your stories, being honest, allowing me to ask questions that you know, may have been difficult to ask, but you answered them, and it was very educational for me. And you know, thinking about like, why am I here today? Of all the people who could be doing this interview today, I'll just add. Well, I don't know if this means anything or not, so I don't want to make too much of it. My birthday is February 12th, and that's Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And I've always been proud of that. And to think that someone took all men are created equal and just could not sleep at night because he realized that in this country, all men were not created equal. And to the lengths that he went, and how many times he was told this war is over and you're going to lose. I've read biographies. He was told over and over again, stop, this is over, you're going to lose. And he kept fighting, and he kept fighting. And he didn't win the war, the soldiers won the war. But I try not to forget that. And I hope that I'm better in 2021 than I was in 2020.
Ron, we
Well said.
appreciate you. We absolutely appreciate you. And let me say this about Nick. Nick, I couldn't be more prouder. You know, we need young players like you in our game. We really do. And I am so glad that I had the opportunity to spend time with you and Bobby here at the museum. And again, I hope that that's the first of many appearances here at the museum to understand where your roots are in this game, your legacy in this game, which is a proud legacy. Continue to use your voice, to continue to use your platform. But the platform can only be used because we have a great organization. We have a great organization that won't penalize these young Black athletes for using their platform. And I right, think that that cannot be overlooked. It hasn't always been that way. A young player like Nick couldn't use his voice because he'd be afraid that he might now get shunned. See, but it starts at the top. It starts at the top with an ownership group that is encouraging them to use their voice. Yeah, and so yeah, there is a responsibility that comes with it. But when Nick walks into that locker room, he's walking into a locker room, as you alluded to earlier, where there's really nobody else that looks like him. He comes from a perspective that none of them can relate to. And so for the NBA and the NFL players, it was almost expected. But for Major League Baseball players to join this effort, and particularly that handful of Black Americans that are playing our game, it was a little bit additional pressure on them just because of the environment. But thankfully, their white teammates joined them, you know, and that was so important. And so, you know, my word to you is to continue to use your platform, continue to use your voice, continue to want to make life. Because I think if you ask every one of us, our overarching goal is to try to leave this place better than the way we found it, you know? And that should be the message for all of us as Americans. You know, can we impact to the point that we leave it better than the way we found it? And I think that's the underlying goal for everybody who calls this place home.
I got a question. I got a question for you guys. Given things are lifted and you know, we get the opportunity to have maybe a little bit larger groups of people in one setting, what do you guys think about doing something during the season? I wouldn't call it a block party or anything like that, but we can do something during the season and we have you know, you can come in and get a plate, you can come in and sit down, obviously with whatever regulations we got to go through, but we find a place and, you know, we have people come in and we have them sit down, get something to eat, and give them the opportunity to learn something different, or give them the opportunity to receive more information on what they can do to pay it forward to somebody else.
That's the best thing you can do, Nick. See, when we sit at the table, we all even. And something about people that when you put a little food in their mouth, they tend to relax. Everybody not tensed up. And so, Nick, if I can offer up a place, I got a big infield here that we certainly would be willing to have people break bread. That's how I know who my real friends are, Nick, is if you have never sat at the table and eaten together, we probably just associates. But if we've chopped it up and broke bread together, I call you a friend.
That's a different relationship.
That's great.
So, Darwin, that's first, Nick, I think it's a great idea because one of the things that I think we as a nation must do is to continue having these more and more difficult conversations to understand where we are, why we are there, and how we get to a better place. And I just wanted to follow up, Darwin, because one of my friends, who is a white male, he said, I've had this friend, this Black friend of mine, for 15 years, and he started reading the book about anti-racism. And he was speaking to his friend, and he said, well, you always say I'm your friend, but you've never invited me to your home.
All right.
In 15 years. And so I'm not judging that situation necessarily. I am saying, though, that when we come together and have more transparent, open, thoughtful, caring conversation, we can solve a lot more of the division that we see in our country today.
Yeah. No, it goes back to the fact that we have to become more comfortable being uncomfortable talking about race in our society. We don't like to talk about it. It makes us uneasy. And I do think that those who believe that if we don't talk about it, then it must not be happening. And we know that's not the case. So it does become a matter of, again, making people comfortable being uncomfortable, because this dialogue has to go along. And then this dialogue has to trigger action. And then I think we'll be, further down the road at creating the change that we say we all want to see take place.
Well, I would love to do this again sometime and do a chapter 2 and a chapter 3. And along those lines, Bob, I don't know if any of you saw online shortly after George Floyd, but Matthew McConaughey and Emmanuel Acho had conversations on Twitter, and it was called "Difficult Conversations with a Black Man." And I thought they were really good. The one thing that I felt was missing was Emmanuel Acho didn't ask Matthew McConaughey any questions. And I think I love conversations where I'm not only asking difficult questions, but I welcome difficult questions back my way too, because I mean, hey, let's get it out on the table. Let's what do you feel? What do you think about me? What are your assumptions about me? And then it's like, it seems like those conversations you always walk away from and you go, oh, well, I read into that way more than I thought of. I'm sure glad I talked to him about it, because it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, So I would love to take this to another level. I mean, I really would.
Well,
I'm a happy participant.
Absolutely. You know where I am.
You can chop it up with me, Ryan. And we had a great conversation just last week when you were over here doing the work that you do in tutoring, and you were willing to ask me, how can I help these young people when I don't automatically readily identify with their need? And I'm going to always put you back in that situation to say, first of all, be you, be Ryan, right? Don't try to be somebody that you're not. But with that said, you come on into the office, if you don't have nothing with you, I run across the street, get us some chicken fingers, whatever. That way you won't feel intimidated when you come in here, and I can ask you some hard questions that center around not only life, but I think you can find the comparison of baseball and life. To me, if we could get this realm, because sometimes people who have been in the realm that you've been in, Ryan, if you've been in the sports realm, you have been in a diverse area. Okay, people who haven't been in the sports realm haven't been always in diverse areas, and the people in the sports realm always say, "Well, I don't see the problem," because they'll make the statement, "I don't see color." When I see somebody, I always ask them this question: when you get to the stop sign, do you see red? So we see color.
We see color.
Right. But what you don't do, right, is you don't treat people any differently as a result of that. We see color.
Right.
Yeah. No. You always hear people, we see color. You're supposed to.
Right.
But I don't have a prejudgment about somebody because of their color.
Absolutely.
That's where that's where we need to go. But it's so great to see everyone. Ryan, thank you. And thank you guys for asking me to be involved with this. And you know where I am anytime that, you want to create this kind of dialogue and and discourse again. So.
Okay.
So I hope to see you all soon.
Yeah. Thank
Yes,
you,
same
Karen.
here, Karen.
Congratulations, Karen. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you.
Karen,
All right,
Angel and
y'all.
Angel and I've already discussed this, so she may reach out again, and we can take this to the next chapter. I'd really enjoy that.
Okay.